Hi there, my name is Emma, and in today's video, I am going to talk to you about something that has to do with vocabulary as well as culture. And that's how we use animal words and what they mean. I always find it interesting when you talk about animal words in different languages because they usually have different meanings. Sometimes what is a nice thing to say in one language by using an animal word might be a bad thing to say or an insult in another language. So in today's video, I'm going to teach you my favorite English animal words and how we use them. So let's get started. The first word I want to talk about is dog. Now, I love dogs, and in my mind, it should be a really good word. But in English, if you call somebody a dog, it's an insult. It's a bad thing to say about somebody. So oftentimes, people, especially some men, might call women who are not attractive or ugly a dog. I don't like the way that's used, but just so you're aware of the one meaning. You'll also find a lot of people use this word to mean somebody's disgusting. So it's an insult. If you call somebody a dog, it means you think they're disgusting. So it's usually has a bad meaning in English to call somebody a dog. Is that the same with your language? Another thing, this expression I really like is in the doghouse. So when somebody is in the doghouse, it means they're in trouble. And they're in the doghouse. So it's a funny expression in English. Maybe you have something similar in your language. So here are some examples. Brad is a dog, so that means Brad is disgusting. Or Brad is in the doghouse. And notice this means is. So somebody is in the doghouse, meaning that person is in trouble. So a lot of the times comedians will use in the doghouse to talk about marriage because somebody did something wrong, so they're in the doghouse. All right, so what are some other expressions? Well, the next animal we're going to look at is chicken. Okay, I think chickens are cute. I like chickens. But in English, if you call somebody a chicken, you're calling them a coward. Or another way to say that is not brave. So when I was a kid, I was always called a chicken. And the reason is because I was the kid that was always too afraid or too scared to do things. So my friends or my brother would always say to me, "Don't be such a chicken. Stop being a chicken. You're such a chicken." So I remembered this word because I used to be a chicken. But now I'm nice and I'm brave. Okay, usually. I can still be a chicken when I watch scary movies, though. The next animal word is ass or jackass. So an ass is, it's an animal, I think it's another term for donkey. And so an ass, when you call somebody an ass, you might be saying that they're stupid, but usually when we use the term ass or jackass, we're calling somebody rude or impolite. So if you want to call somebody rude, you can say, "Oh, he's such an ass," or "she's such an ass." Now remember, these words, they're more like slang. They're not used professionally, so don't use this, in a meeting or something. But this is, these types of words we use informally. So you might call somebody an ass or a jackass. My favorite example of this is when Obama called Kanye West a jackass because he was rude to somebody. So the next word I wanted to cover is pig. I love pigs. I think they are so cute. But in English, it's sort of sad, but pigs have a very bad reputation. In English, when you call somebody a pig, you're saying that they're rude or disgusting. Or another meaning might be, you might call somebody a pig if they eat too much. So these two are both insults. So in English, you don't really want to call somebody a pig unless you know what it means. I think actually in a lot of languages, pig is used this way. Is it the same in your language? Two other words I wanted to teach related to pig is pig-headed. So we say somebody is pig-headed when they're very stubborn and they, they keep arguing about things. They won't change their behavior. So if you call somebody pig-headed, it means that they're very opinionated and stubborn and they won't change. But it's an insult. It's not a nice thing. The other word is pigsty. A pigsty is the place a pig lives. So in English, if you call somebody's house a pigsty, you're saying that they live in an unclean, very messy house. Okay, so let's look at some examples. She lives in a pigsty. So again, she lives in an unclean, dirty, disgusting house. You might say she is pig-headed, meaning she's very stubborn. You might say, did you see she ate the last slice of pizza? What a pig. Okay, so again, this means she ate too much. Or maybe was rude. So we use pig in multiple ways in English. I want you to think about your language. Do you use pig in the same way as an insult? All right, let's look at some other animals and how we use them in English. Now, before we talk about the rest of the animals on my list, I just want to say you don't have to remember all of these. Sometimes what helps when you're learning a language is you choose the words that are most meaningful to you or that make the most sense in your own life and in your context, okay? But these words, again, are fun, and if you are able to remember all of them, that's great too. So let's look at the next word. I really love animals, so I feel sad whenever I see animals have bad names in English. The next one, rat. Rat is a bad thing to call somebody in English. So if you call somebody a rat, it means you're saying they're untrustworthy, okay? You can't trust them. They're a rat. Another thing we might say in English is you might have heard the word snitch. That's somebody who tells the police something, and people who are gangsters might call that person a snitch. Or it might be somebody who tells the boss something, and employees might call that person a snitch. So another way to call somebody a snitch is to call them a rat. So let me give you an example. That rat, meaning that person, that rat told the boss, I left work at 11 a.m., meaning that person told the boss something and I'm not happy about it. They snitched, they're not trustworthy. Okay, they tattled on me. You'll find rat is used a lot in movies about gangsters. So if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, Casino, any movies about gangsters, there's often somebody who they call the rat or a rat because they're not trustworthy and they will tell the police or, tell somebody what people are doing. The next word is weasel. So you might not know what a weasel is. A weasel is an animal. They're long, skinny mammals. It's sort of hard to describe what they look like, but they love eating chickens' eggs. And what they do is they usually steal eggs from chickens. Their fur is sometimes used in fashion. So a weasel is a type of animal. You might not have it in your country, but they live in North America as well as England. When we say weasel in English, we often use it as a verb. Okay, so far I've been telling you a lot about nouns. Weasel is often used as a verb. And what we say when we're talking about weasel is we're talking about avoiding doing something we don't want to do. And oftentimes, to get out of doing something, we might use a trick. So for example, imagine you're at a restaurant and you have a friend who didn't pay. You might wonder, how did he weasel his way out of paying at the restaurant? So how did he avoid pain. Maybe you have somebody who the boss asks to do some work, but somehow he gets out of doing the work. You can say, how did he weasel his way out of doing the work? Now, in terms of this avoiding doing something, it's a negative way to talk about somebody. So if somebody weasels out of something, it's a negative way to say it. The next animal I wanted to talk about is deer. So deer, we often talk in English about a deer in headlights or a deer in the headlights. This is how I feel a lot in life. So let me tell you about being a deer in the headlights. When people are driving and a deer runs onto the road, what do deers do? They freeze. Okay, deer freeze and they look really surprised and they don't move. So sometimes when people feel afraid, they feel the same way. They don't say what they should say and they don't do what they should do. There are many examples for everyone when this happens. So imagine you have to go to a meeting and you don't know how to answer a question. When somebody asks you a question, you might go, this look I'm doing right now, this look is a deer in the headlights. It's when you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, so you just freeze. So I wonder if any of you have ever been like a deer in the headlights before. So now let's look at some other expressions about animals. All right, so the next expression is actually quite a funny expression, and it has to do with elephants. So I want you to think about elephants for a moment. They're very big, right? Well, when we talk about elephants in English, we often talk about the elephant in the room. So what's the elephant in the room mean? Well, the elephant in the room is something big. It's not an actual elephant, but it means something big that everybody notices or knows, but everyone feels too uncomfortable or awkward to talk about. Okay, so for example, imagine you're at a wedding and you know the groom just lost his job. Okay, it's really sad, bad luck. He lost his job, and so everyone knows he lost his job, and it's an awkward thing for people to talk about. So that might be the elephant in the room, meaning, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I lost my job. Let's talk about the thing everyone knows, but that's an awkward topic. I lost my job. Another example of elephant in the room is maybe you have a friend and she used to have tiny lips, and the next time you see her, her lips are like half the size of her face because she got some kind of plastic surgery. That's cool. But you might not know, do you say something about her lips? Her lips have changed. You know she has plastic surgery. So you might think of that as the elephant in the room. Okay, so just some examples of how you might use that expression. Now, the last two expressions are actually my favorite from the whole list, and that is night owl or night hawk. So owls and hawks are birds. They're birds that are predators, and in terms of owls, they're known to go out at night. So when we talk about a night owl or a night hawk, what we're talking about is a person who stays up very late. So maybe you have a friend, or maybe you yourself are a night owl or a night hawk, and you can use either word. So it's someone who stays up late. For example, Joe is a night owl. He goes to bed at 4 a.m. So for me, I'm not a night owl or a night hawk. I'm not a morning person either. I'm somebody who likes sleep. So I like to go to bed early, and I also like to wake up late. Unfortunately, with work, you can't usually do that, but I'm a person who loves sleep. But I know a lot of people who are night owls or night hawks. So we've covered a lot of different vocabulary about different animals. Again, the first thing I wanted to mention is animals have people have different beliefs or different ways to talk about animals in different cultures. In some cultures, what might be a positive thing might be negative in another. So for example, maybe in some cultures, calling somebody an owl might be a good thing or a bad thing. And maybe in another culture, it might be different. So it's interesting to know what different animals, how people talk about different animals in different cultures and what they mean. So thank you again for watching. And I just wanted to invite you to check out our website at www.engvid.com. There you can find a quiz where we go over all of these different, or where you can actually practice everything you learned in this video. You can also subscribe to my channel where there are a lot of other resources on all sorts of different topics, from vocabulary, writing, grammar, to test preparation. So check that out. And when you subscribe, make sure you click on the bell. So ring the bell, because that way you will get new notifications whenever any new videos come out. So thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.